You need land for everything which contributes to India's modern economic growth. Roads, power, factories, offices and homes. And who owns the land? The farmer. For decades now, the Indian farmer has been getting more marginalized and more fractured in his land holdings, sometimes losing his entire land and livelihood for this so-called growth. Flare-ups in Nandigram, Singur, Kalinganagar, Noida extension were big reminders of how desperately archaic and confusing the 100-year-old Land Act was, and how pressing was the need to bring a new act. Finally, there seems to be consensus on land acquisition and Rehabilitation Resettlement Bill 2011, and we're going to refer to that as LAR 2011, which, when it becomes an act by Parliament, hopefully in the winter session, will potentially affect the life of every citizen and corporate entity in this country. Today, we will focus on the blueprint of this bill, which has been finally cleared by a group of ministers to now go to the cabinet. My panel today, Dr. N.C. Saxena, Member National Advisory Council, will be joining us on a link. Gitambar Anand, all right, I do have Mr. Saxena in front of me. Sir, thank you very much for joining in on this discussion. In the studio, Gitambar Anand, CMD ATS Infrastructure and Vice President of CREDAI National. Gitambar, pleasure. We also have with us Shailesh Pathak, President SREI Infrastructure Finance. And Shailesh, I think we need to introduce you more as an expert on the land acquisition bill at various stages. So it's a pleasure to have you with us. And we'll soon be joined by Anshul Jain, Chief Executive Officer of DTZ India. So let me begin with highlighting some key changes which have come in after the last ministerial meeting. The first change, this one I think everybody should be happy about, consent of only 2/3 of land and livelihood losers required. Earlier this was 80%. So now it's come down to 66%. No land acquisition in scheduled areas. The bill has no retrospective effect. Everybody was extremely worried about that. The cut-off date for implementation of provisions to be decided at a later stage. Gram Sabha approval required in scheduled areas, so that's a very important one. Now, what has remained the same? I'm going to just highlight some key things which will become the center focal of this discussion. No change in reclamation and rehabilitation rules. Compensation remains the same. What all needs to be done, whether it's an escrow account, how will it be monitored, all of that has been left untouched. Land for SEZs will be governed by provisions. There was a big clamor from the industry minister, or commerce minister rather, not to have this governed by the provision, that's SEZ, but well, it stays status quo. National highways to remain exempted. Pricing formula for land acquisition remains the same. Now, a lot has happened, but I'm going to go to the person who was instrumental in drafting probably one of the first contours of the new land acquisition and resettlement rehabilitation bill. This is a tongue twister. I always get something wrong here. Dr. Saxena, thank you very much. I'm going to start with the criticism that you have come out with after the new changes, saying that this is not in favor of the industry or growth. Tell me, sir, what is it that's really bothering you?
Well, in fact, the bill is neither pro-industry, it is neither pro-farmer, it is only pro-bureaucracy and pro-civil society. Because if you look at the bill, you will find that even 1 acre of land cannot be acquired within 3 years. There's so much procedure given there. There would be social impact assessment, there would be then expert committee report, then it will go to government, and there would be another committee, and there would be 2 or 3 notices given, etc. I calculated, and time limit is given, I calculated it comes to 3 years, whereas it should have been possible to delegate powers up to 100 acres to the collector, and collector would have negotiated with the farmers and land would have been acquired. The other point is that it is not pro-farmer, because if you look at 2/3 consent, this consent is being taken by the social impact assessment team right in the beginning. At that point of time, the farmers have not been told what is compensation, what is rehabilitation, and therefore on what basis they say yes. In fact, what is likely to happen is that in every case, government will say that land is being acquired for government, and after some time they will pass it on to industry, and this clause of consent would be totally bypassed, because the consent clause should have come along with compensation and rehabilitation. That has not been done, and there is nowhere it is written that the farmers can negotiate. There should have been negotiation, and as I have always been saying, that industry would be quite happy to pay a good sum provided land can be made available in a short time. That is not going to happen. There would be many jobs created for civil society. There would be at least every file of land acquisition, even it concerns 1 acre of land, it will go through at least 200 hands. You see all the sections and just estimate how many babus and how many inspectors and how many officers will see that file. So 200 people will have to be taken on board before any proposal is approved. Lastly, I would say that the NAC had recommended that whenever land is acquired by government and given to a builder or to industry, the difference of the two prices, 20% of that should go to the original landowner, so that the original landowner becomes a stakeholder. Even that has been diluted, and Section 96 now says it will be done only when there is no development. Now, what does it mean? It means that on that land, if I put even a flower pot or plant a tree, I can claim that development has been done, and this 20% clause would then become ineffectual. So I'm a bit disappointed with the bill, although, as I said, there are one or two good recommendations, like even the agricultural labor will get 2,000
Dr. Saxena, just hold your thoughts, sir. Hold your thoughts, sir, because what you've told us is very critical, and I think I would like to examine this a little bit more in detail with the rest of my panelists and let the viewers understand.
Certainly,
because it's a complicated document. So we'll come to the positives, but this one, I think, Eetambar, even before we started the show, was your biggest concern, the social impact report. And here, Dr. Saxena, the architect of some of these fine prints at the initial stage, is saying 1 acre of land could actually take up to 3 years to acquire. Now, this was supposed to actually ease out the process of land acquisition for growth.
Not only 3 years, but it has to pass through 200 hands. Manisha, we've been trying to tell government, in whatever permissions we seek from them, that you please reduce the human interface, and you will reduce corruption, you will eradicate corruption, let it be online, but this new change that is being brought about, 200 hands, 3 years is a shocker. This is a very, very big setback to infrastructure development, because as Mr. Saxena very rightly, Dr. Saxena very rightly said, it's going to take 3 years to acquire even 1 acre of land. So, human interface should be totally brought down to zero. We will definitely have to relook at this entire process. Otherwise, we can say goodbye to infrastructure. Totally.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.